Hello everybody, this is Maniac for Bricks, and I am here today with set number 7036, Dwarves Mine. This is a castle set from 2007. Has 575 pieces, 7 minifigures, and 1 giant troll. This was originally for retail for $60, and I remember I got this actually as a Christmas gift. I didn't expect it, but I actually got to build it pretty quickly. But the second time around when I built it, as you can see on my extras channel, it took me about 40 minutes. Even though it's a time lapse, I had to speed everything up because it was a long build. This includes 2 instruction booklets that are fairly large, and I don't have the instructions or the packaging to show you for right now, so we'll just get right on to the minifigures. Let's take a closer look at this set now. To start things off, here are our 2 troll figures. They're classified as orcs, apparently, on brickset.com. These are both exactly the same. They are the first variants of trolls that we've received from LEGO Castle in this time period. And they're actually pretty interesting. I like how the detail is made on their torsos. The olive green is very cool on their arms, on their hands, and on their faces. There's no back printing on either of them, and they are both exactly the same in terms of printing. The only difference between the two is that one carries a shield, and they both carry the same sword. Here we'll get a better look at each of their faces, which are, like I said, the same. And the helmets that they have are actually interesting. These helmets are from Knight's Kingdom, I think in their 2nd or 3rd year. So it's nice to have those as a little bit of a return for this castle set. Next up we have the giant troll. This is the first one that was produced before they made him in an olive green color. They had one that was in a dark tan color. He's a pretty cool looking big fig, and probably one of my more favorite ones just because, well, of the ones that I have, I like him. He does have a couple studs that he can attach underneath his feet, so you can see he's a little bit off from the pedestal that I put him on, even in the front a little bit off. And there are only a few places of articulation for this figure. Mainly move the arms all the way around, 360 degrees. You can actually take the arms off, and you can even take the hands off. And that's the only other part that moves is his hands. So you could have him in a bashing motion. You can even have him, just carrying it on his side. But his legs and his head do not move. You do attach the horns on the sides of him. Those are separate, but still a cool looking figure. Next we have our 2 higher ranked dwarves. And it seems like that the gold one would be some sort of king, and maybe the silver one is like his advisor. I don't know the exact ranking of these dwarves. They don't really specify it even on Brickset or anywhere else for that matter. We will take a better look at their faces and their actual torsos in just a moment. They do have the same torsos, they have the same legs, but they don't have the same faces. They have really interesting beard pieces that go right over their heads, and the helmets fit just well around them. So let me just take off their faces. And as you can see, they have the same exact torsos. These are ones that were borrowed from the Vikings theme, not too long before this set was released. And you can also see they have different faces. We have one that's borrowed from Vikings and the other that's borrowed from City. Here's a look at each of the beards. You can see how they wrap around the figure's torsos. Pretty nice designs. And there are two variations of beards, but multiple colors for each of those beards. Here we have the next 2 dwarves in the set. Again, they're unidentified as far as any names or any positions, but from looking at them, I can tell that one of them is a miner and the other one is a blacksmith, just by the tools that they have and how they're positioned in the set images. They still have the same short legs as the other dwarves. I keep saying that, I don't know why. And we'll take a better look at each of their faces, just a sec. So for these two, they have, again, some kind of your typical city faces. The torso on the left is also borrowed from Vikings, but the torso on the right is borrowed from Castle. And as far as their helmets, you notice that they didn't have any horns or anything or wings on the sides of them, so that's pretty cool. And as far as the beards go, like I said, they were almost the same beards that we saw before. This one in the same color, and this one in black. So the black and the orange are pretty much the same design, and the two brown ones are exactly the same. Before we move on to the entire set as a whole, I wanted to take out this small model that you create before most of the set and, talk about it. These are the Minecarts that are a part of the set, and they're pretty cool looking. I even tried to build one before getting the set, but I'm actually better to have the set to build them. They are both exactly the same from each other, and they connect, as you can see, using these small ball joints. So you can move them around a little bit. For this track, they're not designed to move any sort of curves. They're just designed to move back, forward and back. You can rock the cart itself back and forth. And even made out of some pretty interesting pieces, they use green doors that are 3 studs long to make these. So if you wanted, as an extra play feature, you could have your gold in here, and as a way to dump them out, you could just tilt it and dump it. Although, I think it's probably just intended to work like that. But still a cool little design. And there's really nothing to see on the bottom. They just have the small train wheels, which I really, really like. I suppose the best way for me to go through all the features and details of the set is just to break it up into small parts. We'll do the bottom section, then work on one tower at a time, and then try to move to the back, because this is larger than my studio space. So I actually had to remove part of the set from the back in order for it to fit in the front. Otherwise, it would be stretching out. It's a pretty big set. I can even take a measurement just to show you in a little bit. But let's get on with some of the details. The first thing you have, probably noticed, was all this train track, which are made out of. In this set, you get 6 of those track pieces. They're pretty long and they're pretty good. They work well with these minecarts that are in the set. They're the right width, and they just roll right along. The idea for this part is that you just push them through, and they go into the back. The doors only open from one side, so you can't have them move from the back to the front. You only move them the other way, the way that the hinges are made. So, we'll take a closer look at this little section, which you can see is a little blacksmith shop. And on the box and most of the pictures of the set, that's where they show this figure, where I intended it was a blacksmith. There's a lot of just tools here. Some axes, you get a pickaxe, you get a large hammer, and some armor you could put on the dwarves. If you put them on the dwarves, you kind of have to take off their beards and most of their other details. So I don't know if you would really identify them as dwarves with the armor on, but still pretty cool to have in the set. You also have a small brick-built anvil, which is pretty neat. And next up, we have this small slide area. We'll get into that in just a little bit. There's a couple of things to go along with that, but we have a small shovel on the side, and this whole tower assembly is held up in place with these with this large beam, so it doesn't break apart in between. Well, let's take a look at the right tower. As we move up from the blacksmith shop, you see a series of ladders that leads up to this bucket that's hung on a piece of string right behind this wheel. We'll see it better when we get to the back. And it's a simple play function in which you can lower and raise the bucket inside of here to a lower level. It's got a lot of string in it, so you can lower it all the way down without worrying about it being too short. And the reason why that's able to happen is because there's a hook in the middle of the bucket. So that's a pretty cool looking feature. As we move across above the doors, you can see a nice display for our king dwarf, and not troll this time, who fits in there quite comfortably. And you can still overlook the entire area. Nicely decorated with these shields, which can move a little bit around. And you also have some axes above there and the top of the structure with some rocks and flames. As you move over to this side, you can see a large catapult. It turns around in 360 degrees, and these pieces on the end don't really serve any purpose, but they could spin. We have the large rock put in here a pretty clever way. It almost looks like a slingshot the way that this is made, and it's used with some hinge pieces and this Technic piece in the end. So simply you could just place the rock in there, fits in comfortably, and watch out. Whoa! I had 3D glasses on because that was really heading for my face. Onto this side of what this bucket can do, there's a lot more we can do around the back, but basically both sides have a dumping function. And I wish that there was a way that you could actually put everything on top of the bucket without having to physically take them out from another structure. Instead, just like having something that would carry them up and then put them in. Kind of like how it works over there, but maybe carry it over to that side. I don't know. But anyways, this basically allows you to dump them all through the slide. Sometimes they fall over onto the track, but they're supposed to land inside this smaller bucket over here. There's really not a lot of space in that bucket to catch everything, since half of the bucket is being used for the slide. That's the way it was made in the instructions, unless they made them the wrong way. Now with our carts in place, let's head on to the back. As we head around to the back, here's a look at some of the side details. And then I'll have to continue moving this around. In order for it to work well with our space, I'll have to take out part of this track, the way I did in the back, and then turn the rest of it. Now we have everything in place. And by the way, I forgot to mention, but all three of these structures are only connected on the bottoms by some Technic bricks and friction pins. So you could easily remove each of these structures and make them their own tower if you wanted to. However, there is also additional holding in the front of it with a couple extra bricks. But if you tried to maneuver around those, you could probably still make this its own structure, or three structures instead. I'll just give you a quick look around the back. You can see how that function works better. It goes all the way down and still has a lot of leftover room. Maybe a little hiding corner there. There is the passageway for this bucket to go through on the wire, which is pretty cool. And down here we have a small fireplace, some chicken in a barrel, and a glass. And here comes our minecarts. And sometimes occasionally pop up if you, depending on how you press them in the course of their movement. Once you bring the minecart around to the back, there's a small opening over here where you can drop off some of the gold and silver pieces. I forgot to mention earlier, but there are 4 of each of them that you get throughout the set. So you can have a good mix of them, you know, in your collection, or as things that you can mine with the dwarves. So like I said earlier, this part just basically drops it off into each of the carts the same way that, you know, you drop off stuff through the slide. You just simply tilt it, and they fall through. And I actually have one that's stuck in here, because there is a small lip on the inside in which they could get stuck. I just move this out. This little area can sometimes get the pieces stuck. Usually they fall through, though, in the correct way. And you could fit, you know, maybe about 3 of these crystals per cart. One actually just fell in there by accident. Let me set up the next cart. Let me see if I can do an overhead. Alright, they all went in. So overall, I think this is a good value set. You got a lot of interesting play features. You got a lot of really cool pieces. If I didn't mention earlier, this large piece in the back is a burp, or big ugly rock piece, as some call it. You get several good colors throughout this set. Like over here, you also have some of the dark green, as well as on the minecarts themselves. Some really interesting stuff all throughout this set, as far as play features, as far as the design of them. They try to make it structurally sound, although it does tend to fall apart at times. I've had a lot of times earlier when I'd have trouble bringing this around to different spots in my Lego room, and usually around this area it would start to fall apart, the area with the blacksmith and the slide, and mainly because it's not really holding to the rest of the model well. I mean, it has a little bit of holding, but it's not enough that it could withstand, being carried. So I'd just say be careful when carrying it around if you do have it. But, it's probably best to just have it as a display model, if for the most part. I wouldn't try to move it too many times. But it's got a lot of really neat figures. We got a lot of really cool things to do with them. And also occasionally, you want to be careful with where you display it, because these track pieces are extremely long, which is good for the set, just to have a lot of rails. But it's not really helpful when you're trying to display this if you have a smaller space. I mean, I took out one of those just to review it, depending on which side that I was doing. Occasionally, the part in the back where we have the dumping function, it may fall apart a little bit because it's not entirely structurally sound. It's still enough to keep all the pieces together, but occasionally parts do fall off. And this does its best to try to stay together. Just be careful with that as well. It's not entirely fragile for this set, but there are a lot of things you just want to be careful about when you're bringing this, when you're building this, and then you want to find a place to display it. But overall, it's a good value. It's got a lot of neat pieces. It's a really big set. It's probably one of the biggest sets that I have in terms of, what you build, and I'm really impressed with it. It's got a lot of neat stuff that I'm, always having fun playing around with. So thanks for watching this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time with more LEGO set reviews.